We are ticking along, and we're moving pretty quick in angelology. I know that it's not a deep subject. You don't get bogged down a lot. Ben Elohim, okay, there's that. But most of it is pretty, clicks along pretty good. And so I've kind of blocked it out for tonight for us to deal with a couple of subjects. And then I'm stopping maybe a little short of where we could go a little further tonight, but I want to start major topics as we can. So we are getting then today, we're moving on to away from the names of angels where we left, and we're getting to the creation of angels and looking at the fact that they are created beings. Of all of the many misunderstandings about angels, some people think that they've always been there, and they're not. They're created beings. So and everything's a created being, every being that is, other than the Lord himself. So the creation of angels, we see the nature of their creation in a couple of texts. Colossians 1:16 says, by him, that's Christ, that's talking about the supremacy of Christ there in Colossians 1. By him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So there we talk about thrones, dominions, rulers, or authority. We talk about visible and invisible. If you talk about visible dominions, invisible dominions, Paul uses that same language in Ephesians. And so we understand that he's talking about all beings, and that does include the angels. We've got a mic drop in Job 38. It's very explicitly tells us about the creation of the earth and the fact that they were there before man. It says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? Or what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? So we know they were created, but we know they were created a long time ago, before the creation of the earth. Here again, we see that they're there when the physical universe is created. The way the creation account in Genesis goes, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, heavens in Hebrew is always in the plural. It's shamayim. There's not a singular, always plural. Why, I don't know, but it is. Now, in New Testament, Uranos can be singular or plural. Same word, and in both languages, the word heaven is understood as three distinct possible places. Heaven one is where the birds fly. Look at the sky. That's one use of Shemayim and Uranos, heaven. The second heaven is outer space. That's where all of the universe is, the interplanetary happenings out there, dark matter, all of it. And then the third heaven is God's abode. We call that heaven proper. Paul, 2 Corinthians, I think, talks about a man he knows, whether in the body or not, he says, went to the third heaven. Well, that's heaven proper. That man was actually him. And he goes on after that and says, to keep me from becoming conceited for these fantastic revelations, there was given me a thorn in the flesh. And his thorn in the flesh passage is connected to the fact that he got to visit heaven. And God wanted to keep him humble. So the idea of the creation of the heavens and the foundation of the heavens and the earth, that's referring to sky and outer space. Heaven proper, we don't know anything about its creation. We don't know when it was made, how it was made, but in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, referring to the material universe. That is the universe, by the way, that when we get to Revelation 21, earth and sky fled from his presence, and then it says, then there was a new heaven and the earth, new earth, because the old heaven and old earth had passed away. 2 Peter tells us this current universe is going to be burned up. And so we know that the current universe, which is the inner heavens, not God's heaven, but the outer space and the sky, are going to be destroyed. The entire universe will be burned up. It is given to corruption because of sin, and a new one's going to be built. And on that new one that is uncorrupted by sin, the holy city, that's heaven proper, will come down upon it. That's at the end of Revelation. So we see that the angels were created. We see that they were created before the natural universe was, because they sang. And we see some parallelism there. I know I'll point this out. I've already looked at this text before. We see morning stars sang together, and the sons of God shouted for joy. That's our Ben Elohim and stars. And again, these are fairly common. Ben Elohim is less common. Stars is very common. So they were singing, existing before man and before the creation. We see of their created status a few points. Number one, they were created with contrary choice. Contrary choice is philosophical and theological term that basically means you are not bound indiscriminately to a pattern of behavior. You have, people call it free will. I don't like free will. Free will, the word free in free will has too much power. You and I don't have free will. I can't be a ballerina. I can't. You could say, well, you can if you want to be. No, I can't. I'm just telling you, trust me, and you don't want to see that. There are things that I'm not free to do. I have agency. Agency is the word I like theologically, because it means that there's a parameter, but within that parameter, I have freedom. And so contrary choice is the idea of agency ascribed to beings whereby they can choose to be what they were created to be, or they can choose to rebel. And now that you hear that, you know what we're talking about, because that's exactly what happened. The angels, a third of them, chose to disobey God and rebel, and they fell and became demons. In Jude 1:6, the angels did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. Those he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. We talked about those with the Ben Elohim discussion of Genesis 6. I believe those are those angels, and I believe that because Jude quotes Enoch, and that's what Enoch says. But whatever those are, if you think differently, that's fine. Jude 6 speaks of angels sinning, and sinning in a particularly inappropriate way. Matthew 25, Jesus says to those on his left, he's talking about the sheep and the goats, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." And so we see there, only in that text, something we wouldn't have known other than the Olivet Discourse. Jesus teaches us that hell was created for the devil and his angels. Well, why would it have been created for the devil and his angels? Because they were the first rebellers. They rebelled against God. He created a punishment for them that is theirs. They're going there, but they have this time until then, and there are other punishments as well. Jude 6 tells us about that. My book, The Spirit World, deals with these containers. If you're interested in that, I think there's a copy on the cart down there. You can read the whole book free on my blog at returningking.com. It's a 200-page book. It's a small book. You can read it in an hour, 2 hours. But it deals with all of these containers systematically, like we're doing angelology. It combs through the scripture and looks at Hades in the Greek is the same as Sheol in the Hebrew. Sheol is a divided place. It has Abraham's bosom and Abaddon. Abaddon is a place of the judge. Abraham's bosom is a place of the elect. They wait there. It walks through the whole thing. Part of that book is also dealing with Tartarus and the abyss. These are demon jails, and the abyss is a temporary abode of demonic spirits, and the Tartarus is a permanent abode, along with there's another one called the Great River Euphrates. Those demons are released in Revelation as a plague upon the earth, but they are also confined for some reason, probably a place in the abyss. All of those places we look at in that book if you want to study those things. But here we see in Matthew 25, this is the first group that enters the lake of fire. That day, the judgment of the sheep and the goats, no one in Scripture goes into the lake of fire until that day. So you say, where's everyone else? They are in Hades, or Sheol in the Hebrew. And that's an interesting study because we get really confused about Hades and we don't know what the difference between Hades and hell is. And that gets convoluted because of language, linguistic problems. In the King James, you see the word hell in Luke 16, talking about Lazarus and the rich man. The NIV says hell. Maybe King James says Hades and NIV says hell. I may be wrong there. But you see hell in one translation, Hades in the other. These things matter, and to really study them, you have to study them deep and understand the underlying language. Hades is a place that at the end of Revelation, death and Hades are cast into what? Lake of fire. The lake of fire is hell, what in modern English we call hell. The problem was, in the Saxon, there was a word called Helan that was the etymological root of what was called hell, and Helan was the hidden place. And so in King James English, 500 years ago, hell had a different sort of nuance than it came to in the 500-year since. Hell today, when you ask someone where hell is, it's a permanent lake of burning fire. But actually, and that's fine, if that's our modern English understanding of hell, then let's stick with that and understand then people aren't in hell today. They will be, but they're in Abaddon. In the Hebrew. They're on the unrighteous side of Hades, which is described in Luke 16, I think, Jesus and Lazarus and the rich man. Jesus tells this story of Lazarus and the rich man. Lazarus is at Abraham's bosom. Across a great chasm, he sees the rich man, and the rich man is tormented in flames. He asks if Lazarus can dip his finger in the water and cool his tongue. He asks if Lazarus can go warn his family, and Abraham says, they have the prophets to listen to, and just don't miss this. And he says, but if Lazarus rose from the dead, maybe they believe. And he said, even if someone rises from the dead, they won't believe. And of course, later that day, Jesus gets news that Lazarus, his friend, is dead. He's telling the story of Lazarus. Then the next thing that happens, not in Luke, but if you chronologize the Gospels, the next thing that happens is he goes to visit his friend Lazarus and raises him from the dead. Jesus is telling a story. He's actually calling his play, if you will. All that to say, we see here an interesting teachable moment, and I just chose to run through that whole. This is the first group into hell. Moving on, we see that angels were created. I put the word superior to man. Superior may not be proper. They are of a higher order than man. They're more powerful. Maybe that's the better way to say it. Psalm 8, what is man that you're mindful of him, the son of man that you care for him, yet you made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. So we see that they are more powerful than us, and it's just a little, by the way. So every time you see a grown man in the scripture falling down and wetting his robe because an angel showed up, just know they're just a little more powerful than us in God's grand scheme of things. God is so much more powerful that it's immeasurable. They're a little more powerful than us, is the way it's presented in scripture. 2 Peter 2, those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority, bold and willful, they don't tremble as they blaspheme the glorious ones. Whereas angels, though greater in might and power, do not pronounce blasphemous judgment against them before the Lord. Same 2 Peter is mirrored in Jude repeatedly. This is also repeated in Jude. But the point here for our study today is angels are greater in might and power than men. They are yet inferior to Christ as a man. Of course, Christ is Son of God in the flesh. Hebrews 1 is all about angels. Hebrews is a slow start. It gets into some of the deepest, richest gospel language that you find anywhere in the scripture. I'm excited to go through it. I'm a little bit reserved about the beginning of Hebrews, because when we start Hebrews, I've got to do like several sermons about angels and the law and the priesthood, and they can get tedious. I'm trying to take big bites to get us through that because they get tedious. But all the beginning of Hebrews, it's a Jewish epistle, one of 5. So it's written to a Jewish audience, and the Jewish audience has a high regard for angelic beings. And so the point of the author of Hebrews is that Jesus is better than the angels. He's a better revelator than the angels. The angels brought God's message to men, Daniel and others, but Jesus was a better radiator. He was a better revelator, revealing God's message than the angels were. So talking about Jesus then here, in the context of angels, he is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of his nature. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. So the picture there is that Christ became a man, a little lower than the angels. Then he sat down at the right hand of God and became as much superior to angels as the name he inherited. So Jesus obviously is superior to the angels in his completion. It is the risen Christ, no doubt there, but Christ still as a man, he is the man that is more powerful than the angels now. However, we will be elevated and actually will judge angels. We'll look at that later when we are risen as well. Hebrews 2:9, we see him who for a little while was lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of suffering and death, that the grace of God might taste death. So we see that he was, as a man, like us, a little lower than the angels. And of course, when he was exalted, he was way beyond their power. So we're just really reaffirming who the angels are, what their status is. They are higher than us, greatly diminished from God. Don't think of these things as gods. By the way, all throughout history, men have thought of angels as gods. When we get into demonology, we're going to see connections between ancient gods and demons. As you read the scripture, you see a couple of classifications of idolatry. One classification of idolatry is the dumb idol who can't speak or hear, the piece of wood or the piece of stone that is whittled and covered in gold, and then people pray to it. You see another classification of idolatry that is empowered by demonic beings from beyond the idol. And so just know that it has been a lifelong, ageless almost, pastime of men to worship angels. Why? Because they're impressive. Next to a man, their power is something. Their numbers. This is a very interesting discussion. And I'm just going to work through it. We're going to look at a number of texts that talk about their numbers. And I'm just going to tell you before we get there, we're not going to come to a conclusion other than there's a lot of them. So, Deuteronomy 33. The Lord came from Sinai and dawned from Seir upon us. He shone forth from Mount Paran. He came from the 10,000s of holy ones with flaming fire at his right hand. So there we see 10,000s. We see Psalm 68:17. God's chariots, you remember that word, one of the names of angels, are tens of thousands, thousands and thousands. The Lord is among them in his sanctuary as he was at Sinai. So again, the number here is difficult. Tens of thousands, but then thousands and thousands or thousands of thousands. It's hard to know in the Hebrew exactly what it is. It's possible that it is plural tens of thousands, and it's possible that it's plural tens of thousands times thousands. Doesn't matter, because that number's still not high enough to affect what we're going to see later. Daniel 7. A river of fire is flowing, coming out from God's presence. In Daniel's vision, thousands upon thousands served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. 10,000 times 10,000, anyone? Mathematician? 10 million, right? Huh? That's a bunch. Yeah. But we're still not at the biggest numbers. We're climbing our way up. Matthew 26, Jesus said, "Do you not think I can call on my Father and he'll provide me at once with more than 12 legions of angels?" I think Jesus undersold that statement. A legion is 3,000 to 6,000. So 36,000 to 72,000 angels could have come and rescued Jesus. You know, once you get over 72,000, it gets a little crowded. So maybe that's why that was enough. Did Jesus need angels to rescue him if he chose to be rescued? Of course not. But the point is, just watching Christ apparently would have been 72,000 ready to come at the top number. Revelation 5, I heard a voice of many angels around the throne and the living creatures and the elders. Their number was countless thousands plus thousands of thousands. In the Greek, that is myriads, myriadon, and that literally translates to 10,000s, thousands. So it's a plural 10,000s times plural thousands. So a plural 10,000s at a minimum is 20,000. and plural thousands at a minimum is 2,000. 20,000 times 2,000 is 4 million. That's the lowest number. 10,000, I'm sorry, I put 100 million as the lowest possible number. I think my math probably is better there. Plural, 2 and 2, no, yeah, 10,000 plural, it's more than that. It's going to be, again, I need a mathematician in here. Anyone? 20,000 times 2,000. 20, you got 1,000. So it's a bunch. Revelation 9, it still doesn't matter. It's still too low of a number. Revelation 9:15, the 4 angels prepared for the hour, day, month, and year. That's the angels at the great river Euphrates I spoke of earlier. Were released to kill 1/3 of the human race. Their number of mounted troops was 200 million. I heard the number. Now, this is really interesting because there were 200 million demons. These are demons. So of that 200 million, there've got to be 400 million righteous angels because there's 1/3 as many demons as righteous angels. But wait, there's more. These are those who were sentenced for a particularly evil deed. These are like the angels in the abyss. Most of the demons are out there in the ethereal doing their demonly duties and trying to pull people from Christ. These are the worst. These are like the ones in solitary confinement. And not just the abyss. These, while in the abyss, he said, were held at the great river Euphrates for this very day. So they are at least among those in the abyss, and they were held for that specific time to be released. So a very, you would guess, small population of the demons is 200 million. Well, if 200 million is a small population of the demons, what would a regular population be? What's the general population on the planet if those who are in solitary confinement are 200 million? I don't know, but you got to guess 5, 8, 10, 20, 40, 100 times more than that. And then there are twice as many righteous angels as that. So, how many angels are there? The best I can come up with is countless. And as we keep going, we're going to see that number is going to be in the billions because of the concept of guardianship we're going to learn about later. One of the things you've heard in Hallmark movies and lore is about guardian angels. That one is actually biblical. There are such a thing as guardian angels. There aren't girl angels, there aren't baby angels, there's no Cupid, there's no a lot of the angelic stuff, but there are guardian angels, and guardian angels are given to every believer and to every child under an unspecified age. How many children are on the planet? Anyone? There's 8 billion of us in all. How many Christians are on the planet? Real Christians. Not just people that, say they're Christian. Well, between all children on the planet and all Christians, surely there's 1 billion. And if there are 1 billion people with guardian angels, that is a small population of the angelic kingdom, the guardian angels. There are many other angels who do many other tasks that we'll look at as we go. And that's next week, I think. We'll start talking about their order, their jobs, and whatnot. But I'm going to say there are billions of angels. And we will drill down on that some more. So, their attributes. What can we learn about what it is to be angelic? First, we see their abodes and their operating spheres. We see, where did I stop today? Did I do personhood? Is that in your notes today? I don't think it is. Okay. I'm just trying to pace myself. So their abodes. Their natural dwelling is heaven proper. Now that's because I suspect, I can't prove it scripturally, but before the creation of the universe, where else would they be? There was heaven proper. There was war in heaven. And the devil and his angels were cast out. In fact, Revelation says they were cast to the earth. That begs the question, and a lot of people have come to the conclusion that indeed the angels fell on one of the first days of creation. along with man or in the early days of man. That is surely possible. The way the text reads, it's also possible he was cast to the earth at a later time, because the text doesn't tell us explicitly he was cast to earth at that time, only he was cast to the earth. And again, when you're reading apocalyptic literature and Revelation, I don't argue against that. I think it very well may be. But prior to the fall and Satan being cast out of heaven, heaven was their natural place, and there are many angels still in heaven. We see them referenced all over Scripture. Matthew 24, concerning the day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, except the Father only. Jesus mentions the angels in heaven numerous times. Paul mentions angels in heaven numerous times, and I have some examples there for you to look through. Yet we see angels on the earth. When we see an angel on the earth, we see an angel on mission. When we get to demonology, though, we're going to learn that demons live on the earth. This is their abode. This is their primary abode. And their primary abode is not heaven. They don't wander out of heaven. They don't wander into heaven. The only time we see an angel, demonic angel, going into heaven is in Job, when Satan appears with them and God sends him back to go tempt Job. But we see, in fact, I think a lot of them are in Washington, D.C. and California right now. I have lots of evidence that there are demons all over those particular cities and some others. Not to mention, there are some cesspools on the earth that you and I really just don't fathom. Yeah, some places in some other world places, severely demonic in some of the ways they do things. But far outside of that. One operating sphere is heaven proper. We do see that as well. Every time we've seen a view of heaven in Scripture, there are angels. Every time. In fact, there are countless angels in heaven every time we see a view of Scripture. Revelation 4, we see 4 living creatures. They have 6 wings, full of eyes, all around within, day and night. They never stop saying, holy, holy, holy. Those are the 4 living creatures, but they are surrounded by thousands upon thousands. We'll get to those later. The way they are described, these 4 living creatures are cherubim. We'll get to that later. So heaven proper is one of the operating spheres. The heavens, as opposed to heaven proper, as I mentioned earlier, Uranus is the sky in outer space. We see that they also traverse the heavens. I mentioned earlier Ephesians. This is the text I was alluding to. God's multifaceted wisdom may now be known through the church to the rulers and authorities in the heavens. What are rulers and authorities are in the heavens? These are angelic beings he's talking about. And not only angelic beings, also demonic beings, because he also deals with, is that 3:2? Our arguments are not flesh and blood. They have divine power to demolish strongholds and set up against... that's not the one. We'll get to it. But the idea of there being powers in heavenly places refers to righteous angels and unrighteous angels. We see angels on earth. Matthew 1:20. Joseph learns his wife to be pregnant. After he considered divorcing her, as the context, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared to him in a dream. By the way, angel of the Lord in the New Testament is not the same as angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. We talked about that briefly because it came up as a question, I think. Angel of the Lord is Jehovah, the angel of Jehovah. And in the New Testament, it's never going to be that. It's always going to be the angel of Kyrios, and it's a different phrasing. Angel of the Lord is a very common, regular phrase to talk about angels in the New Testament. Angel of Jehovah in the Old Testament is not. It's a special phrase. But here we see an angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream, tells him, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife. And so we see in Luke 1, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth. He goes there and talks to Mary. And so we see angels on the earth a lot. Daniel has a number of them. In fact, the prophetic order is that a prophet does not speak directly to God. The prophet hears from God, But when it is explained, it's always he hears from God either in a vision or from angel. We'll talk about that when we get into Hebrews. Or from an angelic visit. Zechariah, his first 8 visions, angelic visits. Daniel had dreams, and in his dreams he had angelic visitors. And so very, very commonly in the time of the prophets, angels were bringing messages from God. We're going to see a very active angel population in the end times. And I suggest to you that we have an active angelic population now. We just don't see them. I don't think they're twiddling their thumbs and waiting for the rapture, so they can go home, get some R&R. I think they are active all the time on the earth doing things that we can't know. Side note, because it just popped in my head. Have any of you read Frank Peretti's novel? It's a novel. It's not Bible. Some people I went to college with that thought it was. Frank Peretti wrote a novel called This Present Darkness. Any of you ever read that?
Yes.
I read it. He does, I think, what do you think? I think he did as good of a job possible at taking how the Bible describes angelic works, and it's purely fantasy, but it's not unbiblical. He's not trying to teach theology, but he's telling a story. And the way he approaches the story is there are people in a town, there's a church, there's a pastor, there's the work of God being done, and he fills in the gaps in the story. You see the angels and demons at work while the human characters are at work. And what do you think, Rick?
It was hard to, there's lots of things scripturally that we don't want to accept as that's what it is, but it's kind of hard to. It's like the Ben element, the
hard to accept some of it.
God, procreating with that it's just hard to get around, and it was hard for me in that book.
Okay.
Accept that.
Okay.
That picture.
Yeah.
I don't think he did a bad job.
I thought he did about as biblical of a job as you could, saying, I'm going to tell you a story about what I think life looks like with our angels working around us. And again, I'm not saying he's right. This is not scripture. Don't read the book and think this is going to improve your angelology. This is fantasy. But he wrote the book, I think, from a pretty sound theological framework as far as what angels do and don't do. The couple of things I think, the angels and demons would fight, real sword fights. And if an angel would spear through a demon, he would get sent to the abyss. And I'm thinking, well, that probably ain't what happens. I don't think, you kill demons and they go to the abyss. But other than a couple little things like that, all he was doing, the pastor's walking through town. And around the corner, there's a demoniac drug dealer waiting for someone to accost. But as the pastor comes around the corner, the drug dealer's like, all right. But then his demon sees that honking angel behind the pastor, and he's like, we're getting out of here. I could see that. I'm not saying that happens, but I could see that. And again, it's interesting. We do have guardian angels. There are demons out there. And I think it's entirely possible we could walk into a situation and our angel might be sufficient that demon that might be wanting to accost us is going to say, catch you next time. Or I'm going to find somebody with a smaller angel. I don't know how that works. We don't know, but it's interesting to think about. But angels delivered a lot of prophetic vision, and we see angels doing all kinds of different works. We'll talk more about their works as we work through the rest of it. Their appearance. First of all, we see angelic appearances where they are visible, and we see angelic appearances where they're not visible. They're there, so it's an appearance in the sense that they're present, but they're not seen. And so we see them visibly sometimes in their visit. That happens in dreams. Genesis 28. This is Jacob. Saw a stairway to heaven, look around with this top reaching heaven, and God's angels going up and down on it. We see better than that. Daniel had a number of these where he saw visuals and interacted with visuals in his dreams. We see them in visions as well as sleeping dreams. And we see them in real life appearances. A lot. Angels appeared as shepherds and announced Jesus' birth to Joseph, to Mary, to Peter, to Paul, getting Peter out of prison. So we see angels coming and doing their thing. But we oftentimes don't see them, but they are visible if they want to be seen. And it seems that they can turn that on or off. I don't know if that's an angelic trait or if that's God's way of saying, this is, we're going like a military. They are a military. When we start describing that, they are absolutely the hosts of heaven. They are military in their structure, and they're commanding. They're a military unit. And imagine, having a military assignment, and the CO is like, we're going in dark. Okay. Sometimes, a lot of times, that's the best way to go. So they come in dark sometimes, but sometimes they do come invisible. And so, I put as a bullet point your status. They appear to come in glorified and unglorified forms when visible. Invisible, you'll never know they're there unless they do something to let you know they were there. But when they come visibly, they come glorified and unglorified. Those are my words, and I'll be honest, I borrowed those from Peretti. I thought that was a pretty good description. The angel sometimes looks like an angel. Oftentimes, he conceals his angeliness, and he looks like a man. Joshua 5. Joshua was near Jericho. He looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and said, "Are you for us or our enemies?" I think we mentioned this text last week. "Neither," he said. "I've come as commander of the Lord's army." And Joshua bowed with his face to the ground in worship and said, "What does my Lord want to say to his servant?" And so as we work through that text, we see that this angel appeared as a man, not as a big, bad angelic being. In Mark 16, they entered the tomb. They saw a young man dressed in a long white robe sitting on the right side. They were amazed and alarmed. So the women at the tomb just saw a man. By the way, I've said this before, every time, if there is a description that fits gender, all angels are men. Never is there a female vision of an angel. You don't ever see an angel and say, there was a woman standing there and it was an angel. It's always a man. And if age is mentioned, it's always young. So our best conclusion is angels are young men. They appear as young men when they come unglorified and they just look like men. Now again, when we see angels described in Scripture in their actual normative state, which would be their glorified state, they're not concealing themselves. They don't look like men. They look like something totally different. When they're glorified, then, is the next bullet, they are winged, they are wearing white, and they're shiny with God's glory. Luke 2, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. There's another point. I've said this many times. Every time you see an emotional response from a human seeing an glorified angel, it's fear. It's always fear. Nobody looks at a fully uncloaked angel and has a different response in Scripture than fear. So we see them glorified, and we'll get more into their glorified look, their regular look, uncloaked, later when we start looking at the types of angels, because they each look different. So their form, I already said this, they appear as young men. I mentioned one a minute ago. Men turned from there and went toward Sodom while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. These men appeared with the Lord, and that's a theophany. I don't have time to get into all of that. But we see that they are men, and we see in Mark 16 above, they are young. We see their effect, and I mentioned this just now. I got ahead of myself. Fear. When the women saw the glorified angel at the tomb, they were amazed and alarmed. Daniel 10, Daniel saw a vision. The men who were with me didn't see it, but great terror fell on them. They didn't even see it, and they ran and hid. I was left alone looking at the vision. No strength was left in me. My face grew deathly pale. I was powerless. Daniel panicked. Daniel was stricken with fear. And this is a guy that slept on lions. And not that he didn't have fear, but Daniel's seen some stuff. Luke 1, angel of the Lord comes to Zechariah. He stands to the right of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and overcome with fear. Luke 2:9, angel of the Lord stood before them. The glory of the Lord shone around them. They were terrified. Those are the shepherds at the announcement of Christ's birth. So that's what we see consistently, fear. A couple of other bodily characteristics, and we're done for today. Hebrews 1, Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? So they are spirits, undoubtedly. We don't have a biblical indication of a physical body for them, but we do. They are apparitional. We can see them. And so the question then becomes, is it possible to see a spirit without a body? I don't know the answer to that. We know they're called spirits. It's one of the names of angels is spirits. We know they're spiritual beings, but we don't ever see their body, but we do see descriptions of them. We don't see a flesh for them, but we do see descriptions. So we know they're spirits, but we can still, you could draw one if you saw him. Hebrews 13, don't forget to entertain strangers. By doing so, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Again, they appear in bodily form. They can appear invisible. They can appear glorified. They can appear unglorified. They're pretty crafty. So the angelic body, if there is a body, is something different than what you and I have. It can be angels occupying the space of a single adult human. The idea of legion is thousands. Not necessarily was it thousands, because he just said, my name is Legion because we are many, but it was certainly many. I don't know what many is, but it's more than two, more than three. I'm guessing it was a lot. If he named himself Legion, I'm guessing it was hundreds, maybe even the actual legions, 3,000. And they were all in the space of one man. So that's a neat trick that you can't really get away with if you are constrained by a body of flesh, and yet they are able to reveal themselves as fleshly things, though they don't appear to actually be that. Is that confusing enough? Okay, sorry. I don't see that they have bodies, but they are visible, and they can appear either as men or as other things. In fact, when we start looking in some of the descriptions of them, a lot of them have animalistic characteristics, even the righteous angels, which is very interesting to me. All right, questions, comments?
How do you think Ephesians 6:12, we wrestle not against blood, but do you think that applies at all, like kind of what you were talking about?
Yes, that's one of the texts I was trying to think of. Read it out. You've already got it in front of you.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, yes. And so the idea of that in the heavenly realms, and one of the things that's going to happen in Revelation 12 is Satan's going to get his wings clipped. He's going to be cast to the earth indefinitely. And I believe that we're seeing the picture of the fall of Satan, but also see that we're seeing something happen on the earth at that time. And it's difficult to be authoritative on that, because it's squishy. It's squishy. But the idea of Ephesians 6 is the text. I was thinking it was 3, but it is 6. They are moving about in the heavenly realms. They fly. Daniel, is it 7? Gabriel comes to him in swift flight. He actually watches him fly up. That's pretty cool. And he's basically said, where have you been? I've been fighting the Prince of Persia. Well, Persia's the kingdom that's, going to come and destroy the Babylonians. And he tried to get his message through, and the demons saw the angel coming, and they fought with him 21 days. And Daniel's told, since you started praying, God sent me to answer your prayer, but I've been fighting a Persian demon for 3 weeks to get here. That's pretty cool. You don't think about that, and you're praying to God. It's like, where's my answer? Maybe your angel's in a fight, But yeah, but that's the picture of them traversing the air and doing a lot of, sky battles, for lack of anything else. Angels and demons obviously fight. So Freddie wasn't wrong on that. But that's the only place I see that in Scripture. But I love that text because that's a whole window into something you wouldn't have known.
You see all kinds of crazy videos where, people caption, this person's guardian angel, but it seems, sometimes it is very unreal and unbelievable.
Capturing what?
Video of different
Oh, yeah, I don't believe video
Well,
ever anymore.
I mean, this has been before AI, but
Yeah, right.
you know, you see some pretty unbelievable stories that it's like, where there's been news stories numerous times of things that just kind of happen. They don't really do that anymore, but they used to do it more often.
There are things that have happened that you could say, and again, I got to be real careful here because I'm a theologian, I teach the Bible. There are a lot of things that could be what the Bible describes, and I'm not going to say they're not, but I'm not going to say they are. You know, I have to be real careful with that because I don't know, even if I did know, I don't trust my own eyes that much, what I might have seen, more than I trust. That's what Peter said, more certain is the prophets. So, we want to make sure that our theology is purely biblical, but within that biblical parameter, there's a lot of wiggle room of what might and might not happen. And so I'm willing to say, could be, but that's it. Okay, any other questions?